There we go. And it is after 8 o'clock. So if you guys are all ready, I'm going to kick it off. Awesome. And begin by thanking everybody for not only presenting, but also everybody that's attending to promote the cause that is also near and dear to our hearts. And it is my privilege to introduce Scott Beckstead, who will be acting as the moderator this evening. And in the time that I have gotten to know Mr. Beckstead, I have realized that he is without a doubt the greatest encouragement to people who are devoted to advocacy and can sometimes lose heart. He is a wonderful defender, not only of wild horses, but all wildlife. And it has been my privilege to work with him, which I intend to continue doing. So he needs to learn how to run and hide. But for tonight, he is our moderator, and I would like to hand it to him.
Well, thank you so much, Barbara. And those are some really nice things you just said about me. If I have succeeded in the work for the wild horses, it's only because I have the opportunity to work with other amazing advocates, including yourself, Barbara, and including so many that I see here on this call. And yeah, I mean, as a group of advocates, we are all on the same side. We all want so much to stop the roundups. We want to restore the wild horses and burros back to their rightful place on our public lands. And, we do tend as a group to sometimes get sidelines over the best way to do all of that. And sometimes those differences can unfortunately cause, divisions amongst ourselves. And it's kind of always been this way, but I like to think that that if we stay focused on what we have in common, which is a fundamental love for these animals and a desire to see them living wild and free, all of the details and all of the disagreements can be overcome. And so, Barbara, it's funny that you said that, that you view me as sort of, someone who is, kind of the face of hope for the wild horses. But frankly, I see two faces here on this call that, to me, are the real reason for hope for the future of our wild horses. And it's funny because both of them go by the same first name, Jocelyn and Jocelyn. And we are in for a real treat tonight, my friends, because we literally get to hear from the voices of tomorrow, the future leaders that are going to carry this fight for our wild horses and our public lands into the future, so that when we all are ready to drop off, they're ready to pick it up and keep running with it. So we're really fortunate tonight to be joined by Ashley Avis. For those of you who don't know Ashley, she is a gifted film director. She directed Disney's Black Beauty. She's got another documentary on the wild horses in the works. And Ashley is the founder and leader of the Wild Beauty Foundation, which does amazing advocacy work and is just the most amazing blend of both Ashley's artistic vision and abilities and solid public policy and advocacy. A rare blend in any cause, but for us to have this going for us for the wild horses, to have someone of Ashley's caliber is truly amazing. And one of her most worthy and exciting projects has been in her outreach to young people. You guys may remember last year at this time, we were going through the roundup of the Anarchy horses in Utah. And I remember that Ashley reached out to a number of young people who made statements on video urging President Biden and Secretary Deb Haaland to stop the roundups. And to me, that may very well be the most essential, important work that we as advocates for wild horses can do. That is engage with and energize and inspire young people like Jocelyn and Josselyn, because they are the future of this effort. So Ashley, thank you so much for your amazing work. Thank you for being on the side of the wild horses. Thank you for lending your amazing gift and talents to these animals that we care so much about. I'm going to let you introduce Jocelyn and Josselyn. And friends, if you've got questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And when we get through the presentations, then we'll go to the questions and spend a few minutes on the Q&A. But again, go ahead. I'll sort of moderate those, and I'll sort of pay attention to those. And then when we move into the Q&A, I'll repeat the questions to our speakers. So without further ado, I will go on mute and turn it over to Ashley. Go ahead, Ashley.
Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction, Scott. And it's been a joy getting to know some of the people that we've gotten to know over the past couple of years, especially you and Marty and Barbara and Jocelyn and Josselyn. And I think the positive collaborative mindset is so critical to this fight. In any space, industry, work, nobody always agrees with everything. And I think it's how you find the middle ground, not the middle ground, maybe that's not even the right word, but how you are able to progress toward the greater cause, whether it's a film, whether it's for wild horses. How do you do that while still remaining respectful or friends? And we've developed such a beautiful relationship over the past couple of years, and obviously spent time at Aniki. And I'm just very grateful to you, Scott. So thank you for moderating this. And this is the coolest moment because Jocelyn and Josselyn have not yet met. And obviously this is virtual, but I finally got to meet both Jays in person this year for the first time. I met Jocelyn Wolf, who is East Coast Jocelyn, as I joke with my husband about. I met Jocelyn Wolf in Washington, D.C. in April, and I finally met Jocelyn M, who's in California. We got to meet at Monty Roberts's event, The Movement, just a couple of weeks ago, which was very special. And Jocelyn M got to join up with one of our rescued wild horses, which was really profound to see. And then Jocelyn Wolf was able to give a powerhouse speech to Congressman Cohen, which was really remarkable. So I think it's just really neat for you guys to finally see each other face to face. So how does that feel, J&J?
Well, I feel like I've seen so much of other Jocelyns in West Coast Jocelyn's work, and her beautiful speeches and her unique thoughts on this issue. And so it's just really cool to get to meet you and with all of the buildup and just get to meet a future collaborator for this issue, and hopefully a future friend too. So
yeah, for sure. It's definitely interesting because, like I think I said earlier to Ashley, two Jocelyns who both love horses, who both found this issue that needed to be fixed, sort of, and helped. And all the work, I saw a bunch of videos that you've been doing in Washington. So amazing. Thank you so much. It's good to have the J team up for the wild horses, that's for sure.
That's amazing, guys. And it's so cool. You guys both named one of the rescue horses, well, two rather, the mare and the filly that Jocelyn M's Girl Scout troop raised money for. You guys basically both named two of our rescue horses, a mare and a filly, which was very special. And that was kind of the first merger of the Jocelyns, the first collision of the Jocelyn magic and power. But do you guys want to both kind of describe, because I could do it, but I think this is more about you guys, about how we all came together? Because I met Jocelyn Wolf. Well, I was connected to Jocelyn Wolf first, and then I met Jocelyn M it would have been New Year's Eve, December 2020. You guys want to go into how we all got connected?
Well, kind of similarly to this, I watched Black Beauty, and there was a webinar that Ashley was doing, I guess around that time. So I joined on there and I was inspired. And before watching Black Beauty, I'd actually never known about the cause that needed to be helped with the wild horses. And I've always loved horses, so it just feels really good to know that I'm able to help them. But I emailed Ashley after, because actually I was really inspired, and the Black Beauty movie was really healing for me, because my favorite horse had just passed away, and the message that Black Beauty gives, kind of about how horses are happy going to heaven and are happy in heaven, and that just helped me so much. So I decided to email Ashley, and I was actually really surprised when you emailed back, and that's kind of how it all started. So yeah.
Yeah, so my connection with Ashley and this cause also kind of started with a serendipitous moment, which I think is the perfect word to describe it, as Ashley has offered. And so both Ashley and my father were attending Briarfest for completely unrelated reasons, but for some reason, Ashley said she kind of felt compelled to sit down at the same table as my father, who works in the equestrian world, and just some external forces at play. But so they met, and my father was like, oh my goodness, this person is amazing, and have to connect you. So he did. And yeah, rest is history. Spark of serendipity that started the fire.
It's beautiful, guys. And it's really, yeah, this is just, serendipity is a word I use a lot, because you know, I grew up riding horses, and I was born in Chicago, but grew up in Florida. And, you know, I didn't ride horses in Wellington. That was not my, my experience. But, you know, I had a buckskin quarter horse and did hunter jumper a little bit, and not in a super fancy way, but horses were a big part of my life growing up until I went to college. And I actually only went to New York City because my last horse ended up having a back issue that was just not something she could really recover from. And so our career potentially together was cut short. And so, but the serendipity of being connected to horses, you know, we're all connected to horses. Everybody clearly on this webinar is connected to horses in in one way or the other. But, you know, going to New York and starting a career, and horses were out of my life for about over a decade. And then finally getting the opportunity after a number of very scrappy independent films that nobody has ever probably seen, we got the opportunity, my husband and I, I wrote and directed and edited, and my husband produced Black Beauty. And I felt, and I've used this sentence before about the wild horse issue, but as a young person who loved horses and wanted to know everything about them in my youth, when I was your age, Jocelyn, or your age, Jocelyn, I didn't know that this was happening. And so it was in modernizing Black Beauty that I delved into some research of what's a modern day issue that we could highlight to honor what Anna Sewell wanted to highlight when she wrote Black Beauty in the late 1800s, which I've said this before, but it was an animal welfare plea. It wasn't necessarily a children's book. And so I felt such a sense of guilt that I didn't know what was going on. And that's really parlayed into all of the work we're doing now. You know, long after the credits roll, what kind of impact can we have for wild horses and ultimately our greater wild world? Because they're almost the conduit to the eradication of other species and land degradation and this much bigger world issue. And yet the horses are guiding the way. And I think that that's so interesting, but it's also the way that the documentary and the way that I met both of you and Scott and Barbara and everybody, it's all been serendipitous. And I think it's been about being open to, okay, what is this journey? You know, let's go. So I love that you use that word. And why don't you guys jump into, because you've both participated in the letter writing campaign, which we're going to launch in a bigger way starting in August, because our documentary comes out on the festival circuit in September, which is really exciting. Finally, they're both in it. But why don't you both, because Jocelyn M, Jocelyn Wolf, you did a video for us. You've done a number of videos for us. You really kicked off the first I Stand with Wild Horses image that we posted to Facebook surrounding the Anarchy. And that was the first time anyone had used I Stand with Wild Horses. And now it's taken on a life of its own, which is really cool. And then Jocelyn M was the one to kick off the video portion of the letter writing campaign. And I remember, I think I was in Burns, Oregon, in some remote motel because we didn't have any money to shoot the documentary. So we're like in the cheapest motels that we could find. And I remember getting on the phone with you and your parents to just give you a little bit of direction of like where to stand. And then you recorded the first video that we released. And that was on that, that truck that went around Washington, D.C. with the, you know, the Children Speak video. So you guys jump in to kind of talk about what drew you to this issue in the first place, and why did you want to use your voices to make a difference?
Sure, yeah. So it was, like Ashley was describing, so shocking for me, whose parents are in the equestrian industry and who also is a horse lover myself, to realize that this wide scale issue was happening, involving, you know, over 82,000 horses that none of my family had any idea about. And so that was kind of the initial shock factor. But then as we delved further into it, realizing how comprehensive this issue truly is, and involving the hypocrisy of the BLM, where transparency is involved, and land degradation, and the ecological sustainability of our Western rangelands, as well as such a deeply rooted history of horses that evolved on this continent and were central to indigenous cultures on this continent, and now are being eradicated at the hands of humans. And so it just was shocking, as I'm sure all of you had your own personal experiences where you were like, what, this is happening. And just as we continue to dive farther into it and learn more about it, it just becomes more and more flagrantly wrong. And so I actually didn't know too much about this issue until I decided to utilize an exposition project at my school to learn more about it. And so that was this past spring. And I thoroughly researched what I could, but also had this realization moment when we were in DC that a lot of what I'd read was based off of BLM press releases, and that a lot of it was streamed from fallacies. And so you can imagine, like, student doing work, realizing that the majority of what she's written is false. That was one major unexpected thing to learn, but also just as greater proof and buttresses that we need to be raising awareness about this issue, and we need the collaboration of brilliant minds on this Zoom call to find a solution and reveal the truth for the honor of truth. So that's my experience. Passing it off to Jocelyn.
Yeah, so I already told you guys about the webinar, but after that, I wanted to find out more because horses have been my whole life. And I went straight to my Girl Scout troop because we always raise money with our cookies, Girl Scout cookies, and donate it to some cause. So this time I went straight to them and I was like, this is something that needs to be done, something that we can do. And everyone jumped right on it, and everyone thought it was a great idea. And I think it really motivated me to just really try to sell cookies. Like, when it's something that doesn't really motivate you, you're kind of just like, okay, I just sell the cookie. But this time I was running around the streets, passing out flyers, putting stuff in people's mailboxes. And we ended up raising enough money, as Ashley touched on earlier, to save 2 horses that were in the kill pens that wouldn't have had a, let's just say, not a very good future without help that my troop and other nice people gave to them. And then I wrote an essay when I was in 4th grade on that touched on why horses are like so essential to have out in the wild and so important to America, and also what the BLM is saying is false. Like, for example, there was a bunch of facts that I found, like the other Jocelyn actually said, that was from the BLM, and I was like, this doesn't seem right. So I pages that were from people like us who want to help the wild horses. And it turned out that there was a lot of things that people were saying that were wrong. Like, for example, horses, when they graze, they only clip the tops of the grass, where cows, when they graze, they pull the roots out of the grass, like they pull the grass out by the roots, so the grass can't grow back in. But when horses graze, they only clip the top, so that way the grass can still grow. So they're kind of more environmental species. And after that, I really just tried to find any way I could help. And Ashley told me about the letter campaign, and I wrote a letter to Congress telling them my view on things, including a story and a Mustang's point of view that I probably have somewhere around here. But I write a lot of stories, so I think that was a good input that hopefully helps them change their minds a bit. Just to see what a horse must have felt like to lose their family, to lose everything that they ever knew, to be super scared, locked up somewhere, not know what's going on, like pretty much having a panic attack. So yeah, that's kind of my experience.
Do you want to speak a little bit to just you've gotten to, and I'm curious if Jocelyn Wolf has as well, but when we started rescuing horses, it was in 2019, which was the very first roundup that we witnessed and filmed, which was Triple B in Nevada. And we saw this little 1-month-old colt, I mean, a few weeks to maybe a month, he was so small, get driven by a helicopter all by himself. And we had never seen a roundup before. You know, you see, as you dive into this issue, you go through the pains of how is this happening? Oh my gosh, how is this real? This is really bad. Oh my, it just, you know, you keep going down this rabbit hole that continues to spiral. But, and it's one thing to watch a roundup on a video or see the photos of how close they get. It's another thing entirely to be at one. And I mean, goodness, I think I have PTSD over just helicopters in general now, having gone to the ones we have. But the very first one I'll never forget, because we named him Zion, this little pinto colt got driven all by himself by the chopper, separated from his family band. And a number of foals died during that roundup. He did not. And he got reunited with his mother in holding. And I remember turning to my very, very compassionate husband, who did not grow up with horses, who's been infinitely understanding about everything. I turned to him in that moment and I said, if he survives, I want to do something about this little guy. And he said, okay. And my heart shattered in my chest, seeing what happened to Zion in a way that I've never, you know, most of us have experienced heartbreak in some fashion, whether it's the loss of someone you love or whatever that might be. And I've never felt that kind of fissure before in that particular way, and seeing what happened to those horses that day. And it really informed how I approached those scenes, which we staged, of course, in Black Beauty. But so Ed and I flew to Reno because the BLM wouldn't take paperwork through FedEx in 2019, which is a whole different conversation. We flew to Reno and we went and we adopted those horses, and it took a few months to get them out. But long story short, Zion and his mother, who we called Zafira for Goddess of the West Wind, and Zion, her son, they were reunited, and we ended up being able to, they're now at Monty Roberts's farm in Solvang in California. And if anybody doesn't know who Monty Roberts is, he's a legendary horse whisperer. I think he's 89 now, and he still gentles horses. He's amazing. And Jocelyn M got to meet Z and Z for it's funny, J&J, Z and Z, there's something afoot here. But you got to meet Zion and do join up with him. How did it feel to be in the presence of a wild horse and discuss the difference between Zion, who was rounded up at maybe about a month, and then the energy of Zafira, who was probably, we estimate, around four years old when she was rounded up. They've both been with Monty for a while now. They're both gentled, but Zafira, why don't you just go explain in your own words how it felt to be with them and their responsiveness, as well as the difference between the two of them.
Well, it changed my perspective entirely to be standing in the presence of what was once a wild horse. And I just immediately got teary, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is different than anything I've ever experienced. I was like, it immediately got me thinking, and on the way home, I was thinking about this. What could have been lost if Zion hadn't made it through that roundup, if something had happened to him, if he had gone through the slaughter pipeline, like something would have been lost in the world. And that is just tragic to me, why people could do such a thing, a small baby horse, and he has such a spirit, so much aliveness in him. Like, aliveness is not a word, but it's perfect for this situation. As in the difference between the two of them, Zafira definitely seemed like she had seen a lot more, like she had been through a lot of things, obviously because she was older, and she seemed like with Zion, I was able to go up to him and touch him, but Zafira seemed a bit more offstandish and maybe a bit more wild, and she seemed very protective of Zion as well. Yeah, but to stand in the presence of a wild horse, I'll never be the same again. Let's just say that.
It's beautiful, Jocelyn. Thank you. And then Jocelyn Wolf, have you ever been in the presence of a wild horse or not yet?
I actually have never witnessed a roundup, nor have I seen a once wild horse and stood in the presence. And that is something that I feel it's kind of like a veil between, you know, my understanding of this issue, but then, and you can look at the hard facts, but I think like Jocelyn was describing, once you are in the presence of those souls, I'm really excited to see how that changes my perspective and just how that adds maybe a fullness of understanding that wasn't there. And yeah, they're just such social creatures and so intelligent. And I'm always struck by how majestic horses are and just such gentle giants. And like other Jocelyn was saying, it really is so tragic when those souls are removed from the world for merely profit. And sorry, I'm a theater kid, so I get melodramatic, but are just removed, souls traded for money and subsidies, just irreplaceable versus facsimiles. And so I think it's absolutely tragic. And I'm so thrilled to see all of these people and to just have the opportunity to connect with all of you through our love of horses and our individual experiences of how we've connected to them and how we found this issue, and hopefully how we'll work together to solve it by all contributing our voices.
Beautifully put. And do you want to speak a little bit to Jocelyn Wolf, how it felt to go to Washington, D.C. and to get that meeting last minute with Congressman Cohen? I remember we were walking around shooting B-roll in D.C. with you, and we get the call from his scheduler, who had just begun watching the documentary. I sent her a private link, and she said, can you be in his office at 3:30? And we said, of course, yes. And then we walked in there, and I remember I put you on the spot because I had read the speech that I had asked you to prepare for the conference, but I hadn't heard you say it. And it took all of my will to not just break down crying in the office as you delivered the speech to Congressman Cohen. I was literally like clutching my hands to just cut it out. You have to stay strong. But it was so powerful what you said and what you delivered. And for anybody who hasn't seen Jocelyn Wolf's video, it's on our Facebook page, where she delivers this powerhouse speech. But why don't you just speak to how it felt to be able to speak to somebody who was finally receptive to listening, and a friend for the wild horses, and just how did that feel to be able to get that opportunity?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. Well, first of all, I think DC is full of such energy that is not able to be created in any part of the world, in any part of this country, at least, because that's where the change is happening. And I think it's quite reviving and renewing. And I was like skipping through the streets, and my mom was saying I was going to get mugged, but it was honestly the most surreal and best experience of my life to be down there with you, Ashley, and to speak to the congressman. I think one of my life highlights is singing Wild Horses by the Rolling Stones with Congressman Steve Cohen. But yes, if you know, you know. But it really was such a privilege to have someone that respected the issue so much, and with that deep love of horses that's a unifier among us. And just to have that kind of person in that position of power was quite refreshing, and also provided me hope for this issue and for the future, to have people that truly care. And he had 1 million horse figurines in his office, so fear not. But I remember that was quite a surreal and emotional moment for me as well.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. And how do you guys feel? Maybe Jocelyn M take this question, and then Jocelyn Wolf follow up. What does seeing a wild horse on the range, because neither of you, I think, have been able to see a wild horse just free on the range, which is one of the most magnificent sights to see, with their families, free the way that they're supposed to be. What does that mean for you guys? And even beyond yourselves, because you're so gracious and generous and empathetic, what does that mean? How important is that for other children, you guys, your generation, and the other kids that are going to come after all of us?
There's many different ways to answer this question, in my opinion, but I think a good way to start is every time I'm going through, like, I love city places, but every time I go somewhere, I search for nature. I'm a nature person. So there's downtown here, and I'm always going through the shops and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did this used to be before there were buildings here? And way back, like way back, it used to be horses. And all these wild things that used to be running around, and just the wild world, the way that humanity kind of was meant to be in the beginning. And like the other Jocelyn said, it's kind of shocking to see that people are taking this away, but horses are just so important for the next generation. I think also for them to notice that wild things are meant to be wild. Like, that's silly probably, but trying to think here.
You're right, though. Wild things are meant to be wild. I think that's part of the point, you know?
Yeah, and they are the symbol of America, and they've been fighting, like, not the wild ones obviously, but they've been fighting wars with us, and they've been our friends, our helpers, our family, they've served us, we've served them for thousands and thousands of years. And they have privileges too. Just because they can't talk doesn't mean that they don't have the rights to be where they are. And in a way, horses do talk, and we are the voices. We are the voices of horses right now, and the same with all the kids who are interested in horses, and same with the ones who aren't interested yet. It doesn't mean that they won't want to help. There's a lot of kids in my class who have always teased me about horses and, oh, you're a horse girl. And then I brought up this cause and they were like, oh my gosh, I did not know that was happening. And now I have an entire class full of kids who want to help and they want to participate and they want to save our wild world. So that's important to me and a lot of other people too. So yeah.
Beautifully said. What do you think, Jocelyn?
Yes, beautiful response. My goodness, how to follow. But to your previous question, Ashley, yeah, I think when someone witnesses something for themselves, and you've been able to capture some brilliant and stunning footage in the documentary, and just seeing some of that, I feel obviously not directly there, but I think it's the closest thing possible. And so I think for people to see that, and for people to see directly on the ground wild horses where they belong, where they've always belonged, I think that would be a game changer. So preserving these herds that are left and advocating to restore the herds that have been incarcerated, I think the more that we do that, the more people we encourage to start to collaborate and start to look for solutions for this issue and join in the fight. And I completely agree with Jocelyn that wild things are meant to be wild. And like you said before, this is a conduit into the larger issue of industrialism versus the natural wild world, and profit over presence. And what we really are, we need to rethink our priorities as a nation, as a globe, and remember the heart of our earth, which is the wild things and which is these horses. And you can superficially connect with people over alerting them that their taxpayer dollars are being allocated to such a dysfunctional system that never should have existed, like we were doing on the ground, trying to convince strangers to care about this issue, or at least evoke the empathy in their hearts. But I think to be there and to witness that magical sight, or to watch the documentary, really will move people in a visual way that hard facts just can't.
Thank you for such a beautiful response, Jocelyn Wolf. And I think that, you guys have both immersed in this issue for some time now, and you've gotten very close to it. A lot of facts that, even a lot of wild horse advocates might not know. You both come down the hard but important rabbit hole right along with us, which I very much appreciate, and I'm sure everybody on the Zoom appreciates. And what do you think, in your own words, maybe Jocelyn Wolf, you kick this one off, and Jocelyn M, go ahead and follow. In your opinion, what needs to happen, particularly from your generation, to change things?
Yeah, so with all of these looming issues in the world that are so pressing, climate change, social injustice, the hidden issues like this are at least less well known, which hopefully we're on the tide of that changing, but cannot be forgotten, because a dysfunctional system is a dysfunctional system. Horses ripped apart from their families every day is not a reality that can be overlooked. And so I think that there is this urge and this angst to act within our generation, within a lot of really talented individuals. And so I think to alert them of this issue, and once they discover it, to try to direct some of that energy towards this cause and that effort, really will take tremendous steps for this community towards calling out the BLM and towards establishing a system that benefits both us and preserves the wildness of our Western ecosystem and our ecosystems in general. So I think just awareness is the first step, but there are a lot of encouraging minds that hopefully will be lending their intellect and their passion and their voices to this issue very soon.
Beautiful. What do you think, Jocelyn M?
Well, I definitely agree with the other Jocelyn. Awareness is definitely the first step, because there are so many horse people and just people in general who don't even know that something is going on. And there's a lot of different ideas about how we can stop this and end this. We need to end this. That's obviously something that we all agree on. Well, most of us anyway. But I think the true answer to that is a lot of people working together. Like, we need good minds, good horse minds, good non-horse minds, people that know about the land, people that know about the animals, people that know about speaking to Congress. Just people need to be able to work together, not necessarily agree on one thing, but we all need to just work together, maybe combine ideas, maybe try a few ideas, like see what's safe, see what could work. Like, working together is the true answer, because in the end, what are we if we're not together? We're alone, and then we're all fighting, and that doesn't work at all, because then it'll just keep going on, and that's not what any of us want.
I think that touches on what we've been talking a lot about recently, is wild horse teamwork. We all have different skill sets. No one person or one entity is going to be able to solve this. We all need to band together and, put our heads together and use our collective, skills and talents to be able to be a united front against what is already a united front against us, and a powerful one and a well-funded one. So I'm glad you touched on that. We've started, it wasn't our idea. It was, I think her name was Jennifer Hall, I think, posted on one of our talks recently, wild horse teamwork. And, in a world of hashtags, that's a good one. And I think it's really important that we all think like that. How can we help each other, and how can we stand and band together as that united front, especially as things get bigger. This year, there's been, it seems like, more press on the wild horse issue than ever before. And that's the result of a number of different groups doing great things. And I think with the documentary, I'm hoping, knock wood, that we're going to be able to bring wild horses to the world stage. And we hope that all of the other organizations, we can all work together and really, really push this forward in the biggest way that I sincerely hope, not because it's our film, but a film is able to reach not just a national audience, but an international one. So yeah, wild horse teamwork, I think, is really important. Do you guys both think, and this is something we touched on in Washington, D.C. with Jocelyn Wolf, but what do you think about a hearing in Congress on behalf of the wild horse issue? Something similar to what happened in '71, but the modern day version of that. Because right now that, the Wild and Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act is being flagrantly just ignored, twisted, disregarded. It's just insane, the language. And wild horses are supposed to be protected from I think if I'm messing up the order, it's branding harassment, capture, branding, harassment, and death. And what are we doing to the wild horses? Not us, but the BLM. Capture, branding, harassment, and death. How in the world is that happening with not so much as a slap on the wrist with some of the, and not to say everybody within the BLM is bad. That's not true. We've met some nice people within the BLM, but we've also met some very unkind people and people that don't care about the horses. So how is there not more accountability? But what are your thoughts on, speaking out for a hearing?
Well, I think it's necessary. This has to happen. And I'm so encouraged, kind of drawing from the last question, but so encouraged that we have you working on this, lending your artistic talent, and we have Scott working on this, lending all his lending all his knowledge about law and his profound knowledge. And then we have Marty Irby working on this, who's knows the ins and outs of DC and how to pass legislation. And we have Eric Mulvar working on this, who I got to meet at the DC conference, who lends the environmental perspective. So I think we have so many facets of this issue, so many experts about all the different facets of this issue. But so I'm personally quite encouraged by that. Anyway, back to the question that you asked about the hearing. Yes, we obviously most powerful legislation in a time when there were 17,000 wild horses and burros left on the range was the 1971 Wild Grooming Horses and Burros Act. And we need Velma Johnsons, we need this collective community to embody Velma Johnson and call the BLM out and hold a hearing, because that is the first step toward legislation that Marty Irby has been tirelessly working on. But in doing so, as you touched on, we must learn from the flaws, because the capture, branding, harassment, and death is the prohibition on that is so clearly violated. And as the documentary is going to expose, and as anyone who has seen these roundups, who is involved in this issue, knows, there are countless examples of violations of each canyon city that we have to draw to the Congress people's attention, and kind of like I was saying with the general public and the youth, have to direct some of that focus on this issue and shed that light. So we're gonna make it happen, I have faith.
Yes. Once again, I agree with Jocelyn, the other Jocelyn, but also Wild Horse Annie, Velma Johnson, she did all this work in the 70s, the letter writing campaign, everything, and the rules don't really feel like they're being followed. And I know that she wanted it to stop just as much as we did. So someone posted in the chat, we need to harness the spirit of Velma Johnson to help us. So yes, I definitely think that's true. All these horse people over the generations who have wanted horses to be respected and treated fairly, people that have written books and movies, and people who have just been there and realized, oh wait, this is happening, but I don't know how to help this. Like I said earlier, we all need to have one thing, that we all need to stop fighting about it, stop fighting about which idea is right. I know there's a lot of different ideas on how to help the population decrease and all sorts of things. And a hearing would definitely be something. I definitely agree with that. Anything that is peaceful but will help the horses, I think, is a good idea.
Why don't you guys both look at camera? Jocelyn M, you kick it off, and then Jocelyn Wolf, just look straight at your camera and ask your members of Congress to hold a hearing on behalf of wild horses and and for generations to come, however you want to word that.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Jocelyn?
You can go first.
See, we're too nice. But okay, so. Dear members of Congress, you are in such a powerful position. Please consider utilizing your voices and your stature and your influence for this issue, because you are the ones that can make lasting change. So please hold the Bureau of Land Management accountable, and let's correct a system that has been dysfunctional since the start, and that's repercussions have only been worsening for the 50 years and festering for the 50 years since the 1971 Wild Roaming Horses and Burros Act. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Well said, for sure. Yes. Okay. Members of Congress, we need to save our wild horses. They are such a symbol in America, and we need to show for generations to come, we need to show them that we are able to do things. We are able to have a say in things. We need to show them that there are wild things still out there, and there is a world where things just run around wild and no one has a say in what they do. And I mean, it would just feel amazing to be one of those wild horses out there, not to mention less amazing to be stuck in a co-pen, not knowing what's going on, not knowing where your family is, being thirsty, hungry, tired, scared. We need to stop this horrible process and program and find a new one that works for the horses as well as the people, that is much more humane and peaceful. Thank you.
Beautiful, guys. Great work. Awesome responses as usual, both of you. And why don't we, Scott, open it up to some questions?
Thanks. And I know I speak for all of us, Jocelyn and Jocelyn, when I say that you give us all hope, and you put a smile on all of our faces, and you probably put a little bit of a tear in our eye too, because you know, we get so much bad news. It seems like sometimes, you know, it is such an uphill fight. We are, you know, outfunded, outgunned by these very powerful forces and these very powerful agencies. But you know, what those agencies don't have, what the BLM doesn't have, and what the forces behind the livestock industry don't have, they don't have Jocelyn M, and they don't have Josselyn Wolf. And honestly, I see your faces, and I see the key to finally winning for the wild horses. So I am going to use my prerogative as moderator to ask the very first question, and that is, I would like to hear from each of you. What are your plans for your future? What do you want to do, you know, after you get out of high school? And should we be looking for you in the future when you're adults and out there in the world, continuing to fight for this cause? Maybe start with Jocelyn M.
Okay, so after I'm done with all my school and stuff, and math especially, even though I know math is important, but I don't especially like it, I'm going, yeah, my ambition is to become a horse trainer like Monty Roberts and find a humane way of training horses that's not with whips or anything that hurts them. And I would like to write a few books, children's books, and books and horses' point of views of being rounded up and being a wild horse. I would like to keep working with the advocacy that Ashley started with me. And I want to, it's hard to talk about myself dying, but before I die, I would like to see this be stopped. I would like to see a change, at least a change. And what would be better is I want it to be ended for good. I want to know that this helps in some way. And it already helps. Every life matters, as Ashley says. Soleil and Aurora, the two horses that all of us helped save, they are special, and so is Zion and Sarah and every other horse out there. There's not one that it's like, oh, well, that's just one horse. Who cares about them? Like, they're all out there. They all have a soul. They all have minds. They all have thoughts and feelings and emotions. And I would like to continue to help that work that we are doing.
Very good. What about you, Jocelyn Wolf?
Yeah, so another great question, yeah, you guys. I came up with this response in DC for when people ask me what I want to pursue in my life. And I really want to create from the place where art and advocacy converge. And I have never felt more energized than advocating for this issue in DC. And so I think look out for me, and I know that I'm going to, wherever this journey called life takes me, I am going to always keep nature and the wild and these horses in mind. And I personally I'm considering entering politics. So yeah, I have some big plans. And I think sometimes it can feel like the dystopian punishment of pushing the boulder up the hill only to have it fall back down again. But I completely agree with Scott when he says that we have passion and we have such a sincere care about these horses. And so I think even though we may be outfunded, outplanned, outmanned, as Manuel Miranda would put it, I think that is the story of America, and we're underdogs, but when the underdogs win, they win big. So I definitely, we're going to see to it with people like the other Jocelyn and with all of you in the legacy weave, we are going to see to it that we make great progress in this issue, because change ebbs and flows, and it's slow, sometimes painfully so, but we are going to get as close to fixing this issue as is humanly possible, and that's a promise.
Very good. I'm looking at a question from Irina Russo. She says, this is also great. It's so awesome to see both Jocelyn so informed and involved. Question I have is, where could we direct the next generation to begin to understand this issue? What publications, internet sites, etc., would help to gain an understanding, especially for those that are new to this issue? Thank you. Let's start with you, Jocelyn Wolf. What do you think is a good source of information on the topic of wild horses, public lands, and so forth?
Yeah, so I think all the small organizations and the amalgamation of such is providing people with such a great resource, and Wild Horse Wins Days. I think with that kind of mindset of Wild Horse Wins Days, and with keeping in mind that we live in a very social media centered age, and where viral is an everyday fixture, and although it's tumultuous and always changing, but I think an idea we should entertain is perhaps trying to make standing up for wild horses trendy, and hope that it touches the hearts of young people, so that it isn't just a temporary fad, and that it actually resonates with them in such a way that they continue to fight for this issue. But I think that's a great way of disseminating information quickly and in an accessible way.
Very good. Jocelyn M., what about you? What do you think is a good source of information for someone who might be new to the wild horse issue?
Well, as for me, where I found a lot of my information was where I first got started, which is the Wild Black Beauty movie, actually. And that is where I first got introduced to the issue. I think for kids, it's important to touch on how harsh it is, but not have anything too visual, especially for people that are sensitive, like myself. But I also found a lot of stuff on the American Wild Horse Campaign page, and the Wild Beauty page. And then if you go on YouTube and you search up wild horse documentaries for kids, it will come up with a bunch of facts and how we can help and stuff. So that's how I got most of my fill. Also, Ashley has been informing me on stuff. And also from just other people, Facebook pages that are similar to us, people that want to help. Not that I'm suggesting kids should be on Facebook all day long, but and I told my Girl Scout troop about it. So kind of touching on that, that basically to me, that means the more people that know about it are the more people that can tell other people about it. So like, it's important for people to know about it. So that way they can tell their family and their friends and people that they know, and people that they know might be interested or might want to help. So that's kind of my view on it.
And quickly, one more thing I thought of was, like WBF is, planning on doing in the future, I think rooting that information in the classroom too is a fantastic way to convey it in a way that kids will, mandatory viewing, but then that resonates with them, just like the social media idea or the Girl Scout troop. So education definitely is a step toward progress as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And
So there's a comment from George, and George, I see that you're on. He said there's a horse rescue in Grand Junction, Colorado, formed by 8 children to help and save not just horses, but children that can benefit from having horses in their lives. And I see that comment, George, got a lot of positive feedback. Is there something that you would like to add here in the conversation with these 2 fine young women?
Absolutely. Somewhere in the Library of Congress is my signature on a letter from 1970 written in support of Wild Horse Annie. So I've been in this rodeo for a while. I've taken some breaks, but getting the horses to the children and the children to the horses is I believe the biggest solution. We've got this rescue that is in Grand Junction. It is unlike any other rescue I've ever worked with, because it's run by children. Their board of directors is run by children. Their parents take care of the treasury position and where an adult needs to sign for paperwork and legal stuff, but the kids literally are running this rescue, and they're open this rescue up to children throughout the community that don't have an opportunity to have horses, whether it be financial issues or they live in an apartment and no access to, having a horse or anywhere, but they're getting the kids to the horses and the horses to the kids. And there's just so much magic there. And I just believe in my heart of hearts that if more communities had a youth outreach rescue like Grand Valley Horse Rescue, oh my God, I think it could transform this country. That there was something more than the video game or the iPad or the iPhone, and just a place where you can not really even have to do anything with a horse, but just be with a horse, be it wild or domestic. And they've got 7 wild horses there, and we're working on getting more wild horses to them. So it's that, I think, is it's not the whole solution, but man, could it just transform so many lives, just children and horses.
that's incredible, George. That
Yeah.
I was just going to jump in and just say that's amazing that you are part of the 71 letter writing campaign, and just the power that young people have. People pay attention to children and their voices and their power. And we forget sometimes how you guys are young adults in tiny bodies like you, but you speak with such truth and authenticity, and just from more of an innocent place in some respects. But then you have all of this intelligence and power. I mean, Jocelyn Wolf spoke Latin to Congressman Cohen. I mean, he was sitting down, but he went back 6 feet in his chair. But I agree with you, George, having young people as well as adults actually be hands-on with horses, just the transformation that can provide, especially with those that deal with anxiety or trauma or worse. It's really a spectacular thing. And maybe that's one of because there's not one solution to this issue, but perhaps that's one of the solutions, funding to get wild horses out of the holding facilities. And not that all 60,000 plus can all go to a therapeutic, program, but surely a few thousand could. There's plenty of programs around the country. Why is there not a version of the AIP program that is solely dedicated to 501c3s or vetted therapeutic programs where those horses are not going to go into the slaughter pipeline, but they could benefit kids, they could benefit veterans. So I think that would be wonderful to expand what you're talking about, particularly with children.
Yeah, it's so inspirational. Thank you for sharing
Thank you.
that.
Barbara, it's 6:07. Do we want to take maybe another question or two and then wrap it up? Does that sound okay?
That sounds great.
Sounds perfect.
So one of the questions that Barbara had for you, Jocelyn, do you find people, and Jocelyn Wolf, do you find people more skeptical about the actual issues with a wild horse on the East Coast?
It's a really interesting question. And honestly, I have not been to the West Coast since I was quite young, so I can't really speak to that experience. But with East Coast, for example, with the exposition project that I mentioned before, I found people very promisingly receptive. And with both children and adults who had no idea this was going on, and I displayed a little bit of Ashley's footage combined with some of the facts and the truth that equines evolved on the North American continent. First progenitor was here 48 million years before the first human ancestor emerged. And so I think just incorporating both of those really did seem to get through to the East Coasters. But both watching the footage and if they have the opportunity, ideally to travel out to the West Coast and see this magical sounding site in person, I think that would probably resonate with them on a whole new deep level. But they did seem receptive to your question.
And I see, Alicia, are you still, you had your hand up. Do you want to go ahead and talk?
Yeah, I just thank you so much for this. I share the depth of your heart, with the horses and with the wild, just our whole planet and wildlife. And to hear you, and Ashley, thank you so much, for bringing so much of this to light. And I could not agree with you more about reaching out on the emotional levels. The science is great, but you can only hear so many statistics before your brain starts to shut down to statistics. I've been to horse conferences with the science. I've been to wolf conferences with the science. And the reality is where I don't want to call you girls, like I'm going to call you young women, where you young women are coming from instinctively and intuitively knowing that it is coming from that emotional connection with people's guts and people's hearts. They've got enough information. They can't handle more information. What they need is to be able to connect with their feelings again, because their feelings are what's going to move them. And I am so unbelievably impressed and blown away with both of you, with your articulateness, with your sensitivity and your kindness, but also your strength. Because this is not, I'm sure you both have probably noticed it and seen it and felt it. You are up against some pretty ugly forces. All of us are. But the one thing that I do know that has been written, whether it's prophecy or spiritual, it is the children. And I don't mean to put you in that category. Neither one of you is a child. With everything that you guys have faced, you have become beautiful young adults very quickly. And I commend you both beyond any words I could ever describe with you. I'd love to, I'm just giving you both a huge virtual hug, but know that you are so on your path, and you are moving mountains, that as much as we as adults might have all this information, have all this stuff, you are going to land up changing the trajectory of this planet because of that connection to your innocence and your emotion and the truth of what you're bringing forth, of what it is to remember our humanity. And just, thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, girls. Thank you for everybody that's on this call. I think you've really re-inspired a lot of people that were losing hope, because we're still, even as adults, sometimes we get on the path of trying to do things the same way, and Einstein called that insanity. And I just totally applaud you for your hearts, for your strength, for your power, and anything that I can do to support either one of you, I got your backs in any way that I can.
Thank you so much. That was very nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Main. I mean, you talk about articulate and powerful. That message was the epitome of both. And I completely agree that emotion and that intuitive passion is the most powerful motivation existent. So thank you.
And if either one of you wants to learn animal communication, you call me, I will teach it to you, like actually literally talking with them. So I know you already feel them and you probably already do this, but if you want to learn that, anything you need, I've got your backs.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be great.
Cool.
Okay, well, listen, thank you again so much, Jocelyn Wolf and Jocelyn M, Jocelyn East and Jocelyn West. You've inspired us all. You've completely, filled us all with an amazing sense of hope for the future, and the idea that we've got two champions working and developing their understanding and their skills so that they can join when they're, you're already in the middle of this effort, but to imagine what it will be like when you are full-fledged adults and using your abilities to fight for the wild horses and the land they live on and all of the creatures we share this world with. It's good stuff, and I hope you will stay in it. I hope you will stay connected with all of the people that are doing all the good things. So thank you so much. And Ashley, circling back to you, your ability to identify these two fantastic young ladies and amplify their voices and giving them a platform and energizing them and inspiring them. And, I'm so excited about, the idea of, bringing this message to more kids across the country. And I know you've got some amazing things in the works. So I just want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you, Ashley, for making all of this happen.
Thank you, Scott, very, very much. Thank you, Jocelyn and Jocelyn, for taking the time, and Scott for moderating, and Barbara for putting this on, and just thank you for everybody for being here and listening and caring. And I think we've got some big stuff in the works with everything that is about to debut. So it's going to take all of our voices to fight this. And just again, thank you.
On behalf of Equine Collaborative, I am honored to be able to thank these two wonderful young ladies for having the courage to do what you're doing, and to thank Ashley Avis for recognizing the qualities that you have and being willing to devote her time and effort, not only for us, but for you as well. And to Mr. Beckstead, for always showing up when we need him to do a great job. So I wish you all a good night, and everybody that's listening, I'm going to do a spoiler alert. Watch for your fall issue of Groundwork, because we might be seeing some of the same faces in there that we enjoyed tonight. Everybody have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and thanks. And before we go, I just wanted to thank every single person on this Zoom call, either for joining or for hosting or for recognizing the promise and the other Jocelyn, and for some reason giving me such a platform to share my voice. And all of us working together like this and lending our individual strengths and vulnerability and word and voices. It's not a pipe dream that we're gonna solve this issue. It really is power. So thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Same as Jocelyn said, everyone on this call, you can just feel the energy that everyone here has something to do with horses and wants this cause to succeed, wants everyone here to succeed. And as long as we work together and we try this peacefully, I think we will definitely succeed in the end, because teamwork is the answer. Thank you.
Wild horse teamwork, for sure.
Great to meet you too, Jocelyn.
Yes, you too. I'm sure we will see each other again, whether
Yes,
it's in
yes,
person
like
or
Ashley said, big
Yeah.
things in the works.
big things in the work.
So,
All right, everyone. Good night.
good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Everyone have a great night.
Good night.
Night.